Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to tackle the Gothic Void Troopers from Anvil Industry. This fella here, he is made from STLs on a home 3D printer. This has come off of my Elegoo Mars, which you'll see lurking in the background there. And I've really enjoyed putting them together, having some fun with this. I've deliberately gone for, some of you might recognize the inspiration here. If you've never seen Alien, I thoroughly recommend you go and check that out, because this will make a lot more sense. Kane's suit is an iconic bit of sort of sci-fi horror history, and I wanted to try and replicate that kind of look, because I think these Gothic Trooper arms and legs in particular really help sell that finish. So all of the paints will be listed in the description below, so you can follow along. Let's get started. Now to begin with, I've primed this guy with a spray of Corax White, which is not a pure white. It might not look it on the camera, but there is actually a very faint blue tint to it, meaning that when we come to highlight it, you can go up to a pure white, and there will be a little bit further that you can go. You could use a pure white for this primer. It's really not going to matter by the time we're finished, but I like that little bit of extra, it's got a cooler sort of finish to it, so I'd recommend Corax White in most cases. We're actually going to start by painting in the little visor on the front of his helmet here, and I would do this the same with these little helmets and also the bubbles, which are they're very cool. For this I'm using Aethermatic Blue, which is a contrast color, and you'll see all we've got here is this stripe across the front of his helmet. So all I'm going to do is just blip some of that in there, and pretty much paint a straight line, making sure that I do get a little bit of this color into the corners. Now when this dries, it will actually, the corners are going to look like they're glowing. Don't worry too much if you do get it on the sides of his helmet as you go around, of course, because we are going to paint that another color later. Now while that's drying, we can actually move on to the next step. I've given my Seraphim Sepia here a really good shake, and what we're going to do is to use this to kind of replicate that faded yellowy sort of finish that those alien spacesuits have. So I am just going to make sure that this does get worked into the recesses, and you'll see how quickly this gives us all of that nice detail standing out. Under his boots too. When you come to his helmet, don't paint the helmet itself, but make sure that you jam it in around the socket there, because we're going to paint the armour itself a different colour later. What's that focusing on? Come on. But we want, any areas that will be difficult to reach. If we just Seraphim Sepia them now, it won't really matter. They won't stand out as a result. So we're going to cover the whole dude, except for his helmet, in the Seraphim Sepia, and then give it about 20 minutes to dry. Now this will dry much lighter than it looks going on, so you can afford to be a little more generous with it than you might think. That gives us that sort of nice 70s beige to the suit itself. And I think sometimes we can overthink what color a spacesuit ought to be. I mean, go look at photos of astronauts. It's all just white. So this is going to work fine. What we'll do, though, is we do want to highlight it a little bit. So I've got here some Praxeti White and one of my makeup brushes. Since I've started using these for dry brushing, I don't think I've used anything else. Those soft bristles really help us applying to textured surfaces. So what I'm doing is just working some into my brush, and make sure that you're rubbing it off on kitchen towel and not something like toilet paper, because that doesn't work properly. I can't tell you why, it just hasn't worked in my experience. So let's bring our fella back up here. Now because we're going to paint his tanks a different color anyway, they make an ideal place to start dry brushing and get a look at what we will leave behind from the brush. So once I'm satisfied with that, let's just lightly go around the whole model. Might need to do a few passes in some areas, but use this to introduce a little bit more depth back to that beige. Now I've gone around that a couple of times, and I've been quite generous. And there is our nice 1970s beige. Also great if you want to paint a computer from 1994. God, they were gross. Anyhow, What we're going to move on to now is the armour, and I've got here Warplock Bronze. This is a really dark, sort of brassy bronze colour, and rough iron from the army painter would be a very similar colour to this. What we'll do is start applying this to areas we want to be sort of armour plates. When you come up to the edge of the glow in the helmet here, you see if you sort of approach it from up top, you run less risk of splattering into the visor. But take your time, and there's not really a correct answer with this stuff. Of course, we're just picking some areas that we want to be darker, armoured sort of stuff. So some of these plates on his back, these ones on his hip here. It is up to you. Now that is so cool. It came out a lot darker than I was expecting, but honestly I think that's going to work super well. What we'll move on to is some Leadbelcher, and you'll see here why I've covered over most of these oxygen tanks on his back here. I'm going to get in with the Leadbelcher and just paint some of these areas, but anywhere that I kind of miss, it won't matter too much. It'll just blend in with the rest of that. So he's got, up on his shoulders here, these sort of cables that are running into the front of his suit. I'm going to paint those in silver, so you know there's a kind of a... And let's fill in his weapon too. Now I did decide in the end to come back and add a little bit of Warplock Bronze to the end there. I think it ties the shape together nicely. What we'll do now is I've got some Nuln Oil, and we're going to cover all of the Warplock Bronze, being careful when we come near the blue here, and all of our Leadbelcher too. Basically any of the working metal. And you'll see here, oh, if I can get them in shot, goodness me, that the silver does break up the back of his pack quite nicely. Now there are actually Gothic Void torsos available in resin from the web store now, so you don't need a 3D printer if you happen to like the look of this. And coincidentally, they were one of the first things I actually bought from Anvil Industry a couple of years ago, so there is a nice serendipity to this, I think. Now once that's finished drying, you'll see how it brings down even that Warplock Bronze, and we get a nice bit of shading there. In particular, it helps define the edges between the brown and the silver, so winner. What we'll do now, though, is I've got a little bit of Nazdreg Yellow. And I'm going to use this just to pick out a couple of areas that I want to look like sort of soft cloth. So let's just do these bits up on his arms. And it's important when you're using contrast to finish an area at a time. Now, still thinking of that kind of patchwork quality to the suit, I've just picked a couple of other areas like the front of his these rubberized sections. You'll see there is a little bit of difference between them, so they look like they've been added onto the suit. What I've got now is some Wyldwood, and I'm going to use this just to fill in his boots, because nice dark bit of contrast with the bottom of his uniform, his outfit. I don't know what we're calling it. Now personally, I quite like the look of sort of tying together the dark brown of the helmet and the body with some boots. It's just a neat finish. What we'll do now, this is not strictly necessary. We're really just going to start playing around and having some fun with this, to be honest. I'm going to get a teeny wee bit of Nihilakh Oxide. And we'll just paint a little bit of this into something that might be a bit much, but you can do that. We'll just pick a couple of areas on the, what do you call it, the bronze stuff. Just painting a teeny wee bit of this. I think that shows up better on the back there. See, being quite sparing with it is the right way. I might have put a little bit too much on the front there, but that's a matter of taste. What we've got now is a little bit of Ironbreaker, and we'll just pick out some of these areas to highlight the silver. You don't have to do much of this, I don't think, but anywhere that you want a little bit more shine, hit that now. Just be careful around his face. So with those last couple of highlights, what I reckon we'll do is go ahead, give him a matte varnish, and go ahead and put a base on him. I'm undecided how I want to base him. Maybe a moon dust sort of finish, but we'll see in a second. I did want to quickly show you, though, the bubble helmet, because That's kind of a cool touch from this set. But, I don't know, looks kind of sus. This dude here, he was about 10-15 minutes, with contrast and some blood for the blood god. And I think you can see that, honestly, when it comes to spacesuits, you can just paint them a single colour. It doesn't matter too much, especially if you are looking at having some fun just as gaming pieces. And, I've really enjoyed painting him. It was a real laugh. But let's get back and have a look at Kane, and get his varnish on him. Now there we have it. With his varnish and his base completed, our Gothic Void Trooper is complete. And I think that's a pretty good result. We're looking at maximum result for minimum fuss, and honestly, a shade and a dry brush will do most of the work on these for you. I actually really like how that dark armour turned out, and I think you could spend a bit of time highlighting all sorts of things on this miniature, but you don't really need to. Again, let's just focus on getting models on the table. Now these are presently available through the Anvil Digital Forge over on Patreon, which I will link in the description. As well, if you're watching this a little bit later, they'll be available for purchase as a pack. Along with previous months, like I showed you with the Drop Troopers, you can pick those STL files up from the Anvil Industry website, which I'll link in the description. And if you do use the affiliate link down there, I net a little bit off the top. So if you want to pick up some cool toys and help the channel, hey, you can do those both at the same time. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all the lovely patrons who are keeping me ticking over in paint and glue, including producers Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Ben Hicks, Trainboy, and Connor. Your assistance is invaluable. So any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comments box below. My Twitter and Facebook are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.